It still hurts, man. It's almost like rubbing a sore, and it start bleeding again as soon as you start rubbing on it. I still feel like, like I taught them that family was important.
He once sang about people boarding a love train, traveling around the world. But his own life has taken him to far darker places. Few voices in rhythm and blues have echoed across generations like Eddie Levert's. For more than 6 decades, his powerful vocals shaped the soundtrack of millions of lives. Yet behind the legendary music and sold-out arenas is a story of unimaginable loss. At 83, Levert remains one of the last pillars of classic soul, but the price he has paid is devastating. This is the heartbreaking story of a man who gave the world songs of love, hope, and unity, while privately enduring tragedies no one should ever face. The birth of the O'Jays. It was 1958 in Canton, Ohio. 5 teenage boys from McKinley High School had a dream that seemed impossible: to become one of the greatest vocal groups in music history. Eddie Levert, just 16 years old at the time, had been electrified after watching a performance by Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. He approached his childhood friend Walter Williams with an idea that would change both their lives forever. Eddie and Walter brought together 3 other classmates: William Powell, Bobby Massey, and Bill Iles. They called themselves the Triumphs. These 5 young men from Canton had no idea they were about to embark on a journey that would span more than 6 decades and influence generations of artists to come. The group's early days were filled with equal parts excitement and struggle. They performed at local sock hops, opened for bigger acts, and spent countless nights dreaming of the day they'd make it big. Their break came when they traveled to Cincinnati to audition for King Records. The label's president, Sid Nathan, saw something special in the young group, but had one condition: they needed a new name. He rechristened them the Triumphs, and in 1961, they cut their first records. One of those early recordings, a song called Miracles, became a regional hit in the Cleveland area. It wasn't national success, but it was proof that they had something special. The group kept evolving and pushing forward. In 1963, they changed their name once more, becoming the O'Jays, named after Cleveland radio DJ Eddie O'Jay, who had become their manager and believed fiercely in their potential. But why did this success mean so much to a young man like Eddie Levert? What had he overcome to stand on those stages? To understand that, we need to go back to the very beginning. Early life, from Alabama to Ohio. Eddie Levert was born on June 16, 1942, in Bessemer, Alabama, during one of the darkest periods in American history. The country was at war overseas, and at home, segregation ruled the South with an iron fist. For a black family in Alabama, opportunities were scarce, and danger was ever present. Eddie's family didn't stay in Alabama long. When he was just 6 years old, they made a decision that countless black families were making during the Great Migration. They packed up everything they owned and moved north. Canton, Ohio became their new home, a place where they hoped to find better opportunities and escape the harsh realities of the segregated South. Canton would become the place where Eddie Levert discovered his gift. Young Eddie found his voice in the most traditional of places, the church. Every Sunday, he would stand before the congregation, his voice rising above the choir with a power and emotion that seemed impossible from someone so young. Church wasn't just a place of worship for Eddie. It was his first stage, his first audience, and his first taste of the transformative power of music. As he grew older, Eddie's talent became undeniable. He sang in school plays, performed on local gospel radio shows, and quickly became known throughout Canton as a young man with an extraordinary gift. But Eddie didn't want to sing alone. He wanted something bigger. He wanted to lift his family out of poverty. He wanted to prove that a boy from Alabama who had nothing could become something. That's why the O'Jays meant everything to him. This wasn't just about music. It was about survival, dignity, and hope. But why would Eddie and his brothers then have to fight for every inch of recognition? The long road to success. Success in the music industry rarely comes overnight, and the O'Jays learned this lesson through years of modest hits and frustrating near misses. Throughout the 1960s, they recorded songs that showed promise but never quite broke through to mainstream success. They appeared on national teen music shows like American Bandstand and A Beat. They toured relentlessly, performing anywhere that would have them, and they kept perfecting their craft, believing that their moment would eventually arrive. For Eddie Levert, these years were about more than just chasing fame. He was building a family. He married Martha, and together they started having children. Eddie became a father, trying to balance the demands of a struggling music career with the responsibilities of parenthood. It wasn't easy. There were long stretches on the road, times when money was desperately tight, and it seemed like the O'Jays might never get their big break. The group cycled through record labels, Imperial, Bell, Neptune, always hoping the next contract would be the one that changed everything. They had minor hits like Lipstick Traces and Look Over Your Shoulder, but nothing that truly broke them into superstardom. Eddie never gave up. He believed in the music, believed in his brothers Walter Williams and William Powell, and believed that their time would come. He had to believe. He had a family depending on him, a dream that had consumed more than a decade of his life, and a voice that he knew was meant for something greater. After more than 10 years of grinding, touring, and hoping, would the O'Jays finally get the break they deserved? Or would they become just another talented group that never quite made it? Philadelphia soul and explosive success. That break finally arrived in 1972. The O'Jays signed with Philadelphia International Records, a label run by the legendary production team of Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff. This partnership would transform the O'Jays from a group with potential into one of the most successful acts in music history. Gamble and Huff had developed what became known as the sound of Philadelphia, a lush, sophisticated blend of soul, funk, and orchestral arrangements that created something entirely new. The O'Jays, now a trio consisting of Eddie Levert, Walter Williams, and William Powell, were the perfect vehicle for this revolutionary sound. Their first album with Philadelphia International, Backstabbers, was released in August 1972, and it changed everything. The title track, with its paranoid lyrics about betrayal and its infectious groove, climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, selling over 1 million copies. The album itself went platinum. After more than a decade of struggle, the O'Jays had finally arrived. But that was just the beginning. In late December 1972, the O'Jays released Love Train, and it became a cultural phenomenon. The song's message of unity and world peace resonated during a turbulent time in American history. Vietnam was still raging, social divisions were deep, and people were hungry for hope. Love Train gave them that hope. According to Eddie, the song came together almost miraculously. When they arrived at the studio, the track didn't have lyrics. Kenny Gamble sat down and wrote the words in about 5 minutes, creating a message that called for unity among nations across the globe. By the time they finished recording the vocals, everyone in the studio knew they had something special. They were right. Love Train reached number 1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the R&B charts in early 1973. It became the O'Jays' signature song and the only time they topped the pop charts. The song would eventually be inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2006. For Eddie Levert, a man who had grown up in poverty in Alabama, who had struggled for over a decade to make it in music, this success must have felt surreal. He had done it. He had lifted himself and his family up, proven that talent, perseverance, and faith could overcome any obstacle. But would the O'Jays sustain this incredible momentum, or was this just a brief moment in the spotlight? Building an empire. What followed was nothing short of remarkable. Throughout the 1970s, the O'Jays dominated the charts with a string of hits that defined an era. Put Your Hands Together reached number 10 in 1973. For the Love of Money climbed to number 9 in 1974 with its iconic bass line and scathing critique of greed. I Love Music hit number 5 in 1975. Used to Be My Girl peaked at number 4 in 1978. The O'Jays became the first black vocal group to perform in arenas throughout America during the 1970s and 1980s. They weren't playing small clubs anymore. They were filling massive venues, commanding the same stages as rock superstars. They achieved 10 gold albums, 9 platinum albums, and 10 #1 hits. Eddie Levert's voice, powerful, emotional, and unmistakable, became one of the most recognizable sounds in popular music. The group's success allowed Eddie to provide for his family in ways he'd never imagined as a child in Alabama. His children grew up watching their father perform on television, hearing his voice on the radio, seeing fans line up for his autograph. Eddie wasn't just a father, he was a legend. But success came with its own heartaches. In 1975, original member William Powell was forced to leave the group due to illness. 2 years later, in 1977, Powell died of cancer at the age of 35. It was Eddie's first experience with loss within the O'Jays family, a painful reminder that even at the height of success, life could be fragile and cruel. Despite this tragedy, the O'Jays continued. They released Family Reunion in 1975, which reached number 7 on the Billboard Top 200. The group kept evolving, kept performing, and kept giving their fans the music they loved. Eddie kept singing, kept touring, kept being the voice that millions depended on. But while Eddie was building a musical empire, something extraordinary was happening at home. His sons were watching, learning, and preparing to follow in their father's footsteps. Would the next generation of Leverts be able to carry on the family legacy? A father's pride, the next generation. Throughout his career, Eddie Levert was not just a performer, he was a devoted father. He and Martha had several children together, including sons Eddie Jr., Gerald, and Sean, as well as daughter Candace. Eddie's love of music ran deep in the family's veins, and it was inevitable that his sons would follow in his footsteps. In 1984, Eddie's sons Gerald and Sean, both still in high school, announced they wanted to pursue music careers. They met their childhood friend Mark Gordon, and together they formed a group that they named Levert, a direct homage to their father's legacy. For Eddie, watching his son step into the spotlight must have been incredibly fulfilling. He had spent his entire life working to create opportunities, to build something meaningful, to leave a legacy, and now his sons were taking what he'd built and making it their own. Levert quickly found success, releasing 7 albums, 4 of which went platinum. The group had numerous hits including Casanova, Baby I'm Ready, and Pop, 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 Pop Goes My Mind. Gerald and Sean weren't just riding on their father's coattails. They were establishing themselves as talented artists in their own right, bringing a more contemporary R&B sound that appealed to a new generation. But perhaps the most special moment came in 1992, when Eddie and his son Gerald recorded a duet together. The song, Baby Hold On to Me, became a #1 R&B hit and reached number 37 on the pop charts. For Eddie, singing alongside his son represented the culmination of everything he'd worked for. Not just his own success, but the ability to share his passion with the next generation. In 1995, Eddie and Gerald released a full album of duets titled Father and Son. Listening to that album today is bittersweet. A father and son in perfect harmony, their voices intertwining in beautiful arrangements that showcased both Eddie's classic soul roots and Gerald's more contemporary R&B style. It was a celebration of legacy, of family, and of the bond between a father and son who shared the same gift. Eddie Levert had achieved everything a man could dream of. He had risen from poverty to become a music legend. He had provided for his family. He had raised sons who were talented, successful, and carrying on his legacy. The future seemed bright, filled with promise and possibility. But was this golden era about to come to a devastating end? The awards and recognition. As the new millennium approached, the OJs received the recognition they had long deserved. In 1998, they were awarded the Rhythm and Blues Foundation's Pioneer Award. In 2004, they were inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. But the crowning achievement came in 2005, when the OJs were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For Eddie Levert, standing on that stage accepting one of music's highest honors must have been overwhelming. He had spent nearly 50 years in the music industry, through good times and bad, through changes in musical tastes and countless industry upheavals. And now, he was being recognized as one of the legends who had shaped the sound of American music. In 2009, BET awarded the OJs the Lifetime Achievement Award. Eddie was at the peak of his career, a respected elder statesman of R&B, a father to successful musicians, and a man who had achieved everything he'd set out to accomplish. He had overcome poverty, racism, and years of struggle to become one of the most celebrated voices in music history. Eddie Levert had built an empire. He had a loving family. He had the respect of his peers and the adoration of millions of fans. Standing at the mountaintop of success, surrounded by everything he'd worked for, what could possibly go wrong? The first devastating loss. November 10, 2006, started like many other days. Eddie Levert and his sons Gerald and Sean had just returned from a tour in South Africa. The shows had been successful, the audiences enthusiastic. The Levert family was doing what they did best, bringing joy to people through music. But that evening, Gerald Levert didn't show up for a scheduled appointment. When someone went to check on him at his home in Cleveland, Ohio, they found him in his bed. He wasn't breathing. At just 40 years old, Gerald Levert was gone. The news hit the music world like a thunderbolt. Gerald was at the height of his career, a beloved figure in R&B who had successfully transitioned from being part of Levert to becoming a respected solo artist. He had released 9 solo albums, won numerous awards, and was widely regarded as one of the best vocalists of his generation. The autopsy revealed the tragic truth. Gerald had died from acute intoxication caused by a fatal combination of prescription narcotics and over-the-counter substances. His bloodstream contained narcotic pain relievers, including Vicodin, Percocet, and Darvocet, as well as the anxiety medication Xanax and 2 over-the-counter antihistamines. The autopsy also revealed that Gerald had pneumonia. According to family representatives, all the substances found in Gerald's system had been prescribed to him. He was taking pain medication for chronic issues, including a lingering shoulder problem, and was recovering from surgery to repair a severed Achilles tendon. The death was ruled accidental, a tragic combination of medications that proved fatal. For Eddie Levert, the loss was incomprehensible. He had just performed with Gerald in South Africa. They had been making music together, sharing stages, continuing the legacy they'd built together. And now, his son was gone. Gerald left behind a final album, In My Songs, which was released in February 2007, just months after his death. In June 2007, a book that Eddie and Gerald had been working on together was published posthumously. Titled, I Got Your Back, A Father and Son Keep It Real About Love, Fatherhood, Family, and Friendship. The book explored their relationship, the importance of male bonding, and the necessity of strong family connections. Reading that book today, knowing what happened, makes Eddie's loss even more poignant. He had collaborated with his son on a project about fatherhood and family, only to lose that son shortly before the world would read their words. At Gerald's funeral service on November 17, 2006, Eddie and his son, Sean, performed Dance with My Father, personalizing the lyrics for Gerald. It was one of the most heartbreaking moments in R&B history. A father and brother saying goodbye through song, the one language they all shared. Eddie somehow found the strength to continue. In 2008, he and Gerald were posthumously presented with the Best Duo or Group Image Award for their duet work. Later that same year, another album of duets between Eddie and Gerald, titled Something to Talk About, was released. Recorded in 2006 before Gerald's death, the album stands as a testament to their musical chemistry and their unbreakable bond. Eddie Levert had survived the unthinkable, burying his son. He had found a way to keep living, keep performing, keep honoring Gerald's memory through music. Surely, after suffering such a devastating loss, life would give this grieving father some peace. But was Eddie's nightmare wasn't really over? Because there was more heartbreak still to come. Unimaginable, the second tragedy. Eddie Levert was still grieving the loss of Gerald when lightning struck twice. On March 24, 2008, just 16 months after Gerald's death, Eddie's son, Sean Levert, was taken into custody at the Cuyahoga County Correctional Facility in Cleveland. He had pleaded guilty to 6 counts of failure to pay child support totaling approximately $89,000 to 3 children ages 11, 15, and 17. He was sentenced to 22 months in jail. Sean entered the jail reporting that he had been taking Xanax, a prescription anti-anxiety medication, and had brought his prescription bottle with him. However, jail policy dictated that inmates could not continue taking Xanax without first being evaluated by a jail psychiatrist. That evaluation never happened. What followed was a nightmare. Without his medication, Sean began experiencing severe withdrawal symptoms. He reported hallucinations. His blood pressure spiked dangerously high. He told guards that he saw his son falling into a pool outside his cell window, an obvious hallucination that should have been recognized as a medical emergency. On March 30, 2008, just 6 days after entering the jail, Sean's condition deteriorated dramatically. Surveillance video from the jail shows Sean strapped into a restraint chair after he began pounding on his cell walls and floor. In the video, he can be heard repeatedly shouting, "No, no!" and calling for his mother as several jail officers tied him down. Less than an hour later, Sean Levert was dead. He was 39 years old. The official cause of death, according to Cuyahoga County Coroner Frank Miller, was complications from sarcoidosis, an inflammatory lung disease. However, the coroner also noted that Sean suffered from other conditions, including cardiovascular disease, high blood sugar, and acute withdrawal from Xanax. Sean's widow, Angela Lowe, filed a federal wrongful death lawsuit against the county jail, accusing officials of neglecting his medical needs. The lawsuit argued that Sean suffered from severe anxiety and that the jail failed to provide him with adequate nursing assessment, mental health evaluation, or his prescribed medication. In 2010, the case was settled. The Levert estate was awarded $4 million, but no amount of money could ease Eddie Levert's pain. Within the span of less than 2 years, he had buried both Gerald and Sean. 2 sons, 2 voices silenced forever, 2 futures cut tragically short. How does a parent survive something like this? How does someone continue to perform, to sing songs of love and hope, when they've experienced such profound loss? Where could Eddie possibly find the strength to go on? Finding strength in faith. For Eddie Levert, the answer was faith. In a 2011 interview with the Plain Dealer, Eddie opened up about how he coped with the deaths of his sons. He explained, "My closeness with God has helped me a great deal. I'm no holy roller by any means, but I believe. There are only 2 kinds of people in the world, the believer and the non-believer. I happen to be a believer." Eddie found particular solace in the biblical story of Job, a man who lost everything but maintained his faith. "I read the book of Job," Eddie said. "He lost everything. I didn't lose everything. I lost 2 sons. It's not trivial. But compared to somebody who lost their whole family, do you understand? I was left something. God is still great. I kept praying to God, and God kept giving me strength." In 2012, Eddie released his first solo album titled I Still Have It. The album's lead single, Last Man Standing, was a moving tribute to Gerald and Sean. In interviews about the album, Eddie revealed that he had been working on it for 5 years, starting before his sons passed away. The project took on new meaning after their deaths, becoming not just a showcase of his own artistry, but a testament to survival and perseverance. Eddie had found a way to channel his grief into something meaningful. He was honoring his sons through music, the one language that had always connected their family. He was showing the world that even in the darkest valley, faith and art could provide a path forward. But would Eddie finally find some measure of peace? Or was fate preparing one more unbearable blow for this grieving father? A new chapter. In 1995, Eddie had remarried. His new wife, Raquel Capleton, would become his partner through both joyful and devastating times. Together, they had a daughter named Ryan, born in 2002. While Eddie lost 2 sons, he still had children who needed him. He had a career that demanded his attention, and he had fans who depended on the music that had been their soundtrack for decades. Eddie continued performing with the O'Jays. Walter Williams, his friend since their teenage years in Canton, remained by his side. That same year, Eric Nolan Grant joined the group, becoming an integral part of keeping the O'Jays' legacy alive. The group kept touring, kept performing the hits that audiences loved. When Eddie would sing Love Train or Backstabbers or For the Love of Money, he wasn't just performing songs, he was honoring a lifetime of work, celebrating the legacy he'd built with his brothers in music, and connecting with fans who had grown up with his voice. Eddie also started a podcast called In Our Opinion. The show features Eddie alongside Ryan and Lamika Levert, Gerald's son, continuing the family tradition of sharing their voices and perspectives with the world. For someone who had experienced such tremendous loss, Eddie's ability to keep moving forward was remarkable. He posted regularly on social media, sharing updates with fans, performing at events, and living his life with as much fullness as possible. He seemed to have found a new equilibrium, a way to carry his grief while still celebrating the blessings that remained. Ryan, his youngest daughter, represented hope and renewal. She was a connection to the future, a reason to keep believing that life could still hold joy. Eddie had survived the unthinkable twice. Surely, after everything he'd been through, he had paid enough. Surely the universe would spare him from any more heartbreak. Would that hope prove true? Or was there one more tragedy waiting in the shadows? The third unbearable loss. Just when it seemed that Eddie Levert had found a way to carry his grief while still celebrating life, tragedy struck again. In December 2024, Eddie's youngest daughter, Ryan Levert, passed away at the age of 22. Ryan had been battling lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease in which the body's immune system attacks its own tissues and organs. Lupus can affect joints, skin, kidneys, blood cells, brain, heart, and lungs, causing widespread inflammation and damage. Despite treatment, the disease claimed Ryan's young life. The news was confirmed by Carlissia Levert, Gerald's daughter and Ryan's cousin, who shared photos of Ryan on Instagram along with a heartbreaking message. "I am so thankful that you don't have to go through any more pain." Eddie Levert, at 83 years old, had now buried 3 of his children: Gerald at 40, Sean at 39, and now Ryan at just 22. 3 children lost to different circumstances: prescription substance toxicity, medical neglect in jail, and disease, but all equally devastating to a father's heart. The music community rallied around Eddie once more. Messages of sympathy poured in from fans and fellow artists alike. For any parent, losing one child is an unbearable tragedy. But 3? How does someone survive that? How does an 83-year-old man find the will to keep going after burying 3 of his children? What keeps Eddie Levert standing when most people would have crumbled long ago? The legend endures. As of late 2025, Eddie Levert continues to perform. Now, 83 years old, he remains active in the music community. A living legend who has survived losses that would have destroyed many people. He is still married to Raquel, who has stood by him through the most difficult years of his life. He has other children, including Eddie Jr. and Candace, as well as grandchildren like Lamika and Carlissia, who are keeping the family's musical legacy alive. Despite recurring death hoaxes that periodically spread across social media, Eddie is very much alive. He still occasionally posts videos showing himself on the road again, still connecting with fans, still singing the songs that have meant so much to so many people for so many years. The O'Jays' music continues to be celebrated and discovered by new generations. Their songs have been featured in countless movies and television shows. The group's influence on R&B, soul, and popular music is immeasurable. In 2013, the O'Jays were inducted into the National Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. The awards and recognition continue to come, testament to a career that has spanned more than 6 decades and influenced countless artists. A legacy of strength. Eddie Levert's story is one of extraordinary triumph and unbearable tragedy. He rose from poverty in Alabama to become one of the most iconic voices in music history. He helped create the sound of Philadelphia. He scored #1 hits that topped charts around the world. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He built a musical dynasty that included his sons and now his grandchildren. But he also paid a price that no amount of fame or success could possibly justify. He has stood at the graves of 3 of his children. He has experienced losses that would have broken most people. He has had to find reasons to keep singing, keep performing, keep living, when everything in him must have wanted to simply give up. Yet Eddie Levert is still here, still singing, still performing, still finding strength in his faith, his remaining family, and his music. When you listen to the OJ's music today, you're hearing more than just expertly crafted soul songs. You're hearing the voice of a man who has experienced the highest highs and the lowest lows that life can offer. You're hearing resilience. You're hearing faith. You're hearing a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even the most unbearable pain. Eddie Levert, 83, remains a survivor, honoring 3 lost children through music. His strength and faith redefine Love Train, turning it into a testament to hope after immeasurable loss. His story is not only tragedy, but unbroken spirit, enduring legacy, and a voice still carrying generations forward with lasting resonance. If you made it this far, go on and hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. There's plenty more where this came from.